That must be a new function. I have no idea. Did it on Thursday night too.
Okay,
Yeah. Just in case you were wondering.
all right. You learn something new every day.
And I think you have to say if it's okay, right? I
Yeah.
think everybody gets one of those.
You get the opportunity to leave if you don't want to be recorded.
Okay. So in any case, Parshat Shalach Lecha, it's translated, if you looked at the beginning, it's translated to Moses, today in the Eitz Chaim as send men to scout the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelite people. Send one man from each of their ancestral tribes, each one a chieftain among them. And so Moses, by the Lord's command, sent them out from the wilderness of Paran, all the men being leaders of the Israelites, and these were their names. So that implies at first glance that this is coming from Hashem to tell the people to go scout the land, even though that God has already, so to speak, scouted the land. And that's why God is bringing them to this great location. And but later on in Deuteronomy, we see that it was Moses who decided to send the people out. So there's a big question mark there, and that's already implying some kind of doubt. So it gets even more interesting here. As I mentioned earlier, that the 10 alleged leaders of these various tribes, they did come back and say, to their credit, that it truly was a land of milk and honey, a lot of bounty, and it was a wonderful place. But the people that live there are giants. The walls are fortified. And I think at one point it said that the walls are like 30 feet high and 15 feet thick and something like that. So I want you to put yourself in their position for just a minute. You've theoretically been chosen, at least by Moses, if not God. You've been sent on this mission. Now you're reporting back what you have found after 40 days of being in the land and seeing allegedly all these giant people and giant fortifications. So you, as one of the leaders of the tribes, how do you feel when you come back to report to Moses and the rest of the people that weren't there? Any thoughts on this? Any on-screen thoughts? How do you feel as one of these leaders? No thoughts? Anybody here?
Scared
Okay, why scared, Bill?
because those guys are bigger than I am.
Okay, but if you use that analogy, what about going back to the story of David versus Goliath? Goliath was certainly far larger than David, but David had essentially no problems taking him down with a slingshot.
But you know, most people would be afraid of someone bigger than them. So David was exceptional that way.
Okay, so maybe is that one of the qualities of being a great leader, is to be exceptional in whatever manner it takes?
Well, ideally that's the case, but we've proven in America that that's not necessarily the case, since we elected a very unexceptional person,
Well,
or maybe an exceptionally bad person.
okay,
Well, he did lead a lot of people just the wrong way. I mean, there's a lot of people who are following him. But I was thinking, these guys just came out of the wilderness, and they are tired, and they're not organized, and they see all these people who could, very organized and very ready. And I think they're not only, they were scared, but they just didn't think they had enough. And it takes the high quality of the person to look at, yeah, this is all true, and here's what we can do, and I still think we can do this.
Okay, so what was it? Caleb and Joshua were both in that scouting party also. What gave them the strength to see this from a very different perspective versus the 10 spies that said that we can't do this?
Well, I think that is exceptional leadership, is that you look it through different lens. And the lens you look through is not, how awful things are, but how we can make it better and how we can figure this out. I think it's real interesting in Israel that these people, this coalition got together who are very different in their religious beliefs, but they have a purpose of what they need to do and a goal to make it happen. And I think, that's the frame that these guys did. They said, we're going to cross over here. So how are we going to make that happen?
By the way, just one additional comment on that. One of the comments that I read about Naftali Bennett from Yamina, he basically told his family that I am going to be the most hated man in the entire country.
Yeah.
That's a heavy,
that's putting the thing, whatever it is, in this case the coalition, before yourself. And I think when people great leaders do that, they put it before himself. My
okay.
brother said, I got to let you have your Devar tour, so I'll be quiet now.
So, all right, so we've got these two perspectives. Jill, just come on up here for a moment.
People here, I'm sorry for not being taller. On another level, isn't it just saying Joshua and Caleb still believe that just as God brought us forth from Egypt, God said we're supposed to cross and it will happen and things will go well, that they believe. So isn't that like another way of doing it?
Yeah, it certainly is. So just to put that in perspective, what Jill just said, don't forget, God has just taken them out of Egypt, destroyed the Egyptian army, brought them to Sinai, through the desert, fed them, over 1 million people on a daily basis with the manna, gave them the 10 commandments at Mount Sinai with all the theatrics there. And yet we still have the story of the golden calf. We also had the story of the people grumbling that there wasn't enough to eat other than this manna, and the whole story with the quail. And last week's Pasha that we finished off with, the Halotaka, it talked about Miriam and Aaron basically questioning Moses's sole authority to interpret the words of God. So even rebellion at that high level, and these are supposed to be leaders and prophetesses as well. And I'll just kind of put you into this situation for a minute. Think about many of our ancestors who left the familiar lands of Russia or many of the Mizrahi countries, all around Yemen and Morocco and wherever, all the European countries. And life was pretty terrible over there, but they also managed to find a way to leave before they lost their lives and make that journey to parts unknown, the US, Israel, or Palestine in those days, and other countries that would actually take them in. That was a huge undertaking. And I'm going to go back to what Bill said a minute ago. I've lived in this one place for all my life. Now, all of a sudden, I'm uprooting my family, my friends. We're leaving. We can't stay in this place any longer. And yet we're going to this new land that we know nothing about. One of the commentators that I read was a rabbi who was just going to Israel for her rabbinical study year. And she said, I wish I could remember her name. Oh, here it is. Rabbi Marissa Alana Jane. Said when she was getting ready to go to Israel, all her friends were telling her, make sure you stock up on this product, that product, bring all kinds of things that you need. Going to a new land, they speak a different language. It's different customs over there. And as she started to incorporate all this, she actually became extremely fearful. Was she actually doing the right, making the right decision here? And then two of her friends said, yes, that's all true, but you're going to be able to learn a new language. There are people there to help you. There are people there to support you. You're going to feel absolutely amazing after you do this. And sure enough, she did realize that, but it wasn't until she got there and she was able to put all her fears to rest. So now we have these alleged military spies, but they're also told to bring back the fruit of the land. And they carry back this humongous, whatever they call it, of grapes, cluster of grapes, I guess. And they're showing people how beautiful this land can be. And they talk about all the great things. And yet, they still don't feel comfortable in saying that after everything that God has done now, that things are now going to change because we're actually going into the land. They can't put themselves in there. So we talked about some of the things, an exceptional quality, a vision of what the future is hold, a plan to get to that vision. You know, these are all the qualities of a good leader. So how do we incorporate a lot of these things in our own lives when we're facing a huge challenge? We have enough faith to continue, whether it's medical, uprooting yourself, moving from one place to another. The rabbi said recently that he found that this move was the most challenging one for him of all, because he realized it's time to downsize and he didn't want to leave that for his kids. But it's also, what does he get rid of? What does he downsize? All these things are going through his mind. You know, is he making the right decision as to getting rid of this book or that book or whatever it is? People that have faced medical situations, you know, how do you know that we're on the right track? Political situations. What is it that gives us that inner strength? I have yet to find out the answer on that personally, but I am actually envious of those people that can not only see their vision and project what the future might have in store for us, but then again, having the guts to carry something like that out. I find that to be a tremendous undertaking. And do I want to be basically alone by myself in this endeavor? I can't see myself clearly in that position, but there have been many situations where those questions have arisen and somehow they have to be addressed. Any other thoughts on this Pasha from what we've already discussed? That's God talking to us directly. So I'm going to share with you I found many commentaries that I wanted to try and incorporate here, but I'm just going to leave you with one. And this is from, again, My Jewish Learning. This is from Rabbi Neil Lovinger, and it's called Seeing Beneath the Surface. And he's referring to the 10 of the 12 spies despairing of being able to conquer the land of Canaan. So he says, and they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. This is one of the most dramatic scenes in the entire Torah. It's right up there with some of the other things that we've already covered so far. And he refers back to one of the greatest teachers of Torah of our age, Nechama Leibowitz, of a blessed memory. In one of her essays on this Torah portion, asks an important question. How did the spies know what the giants thought of them? They don't report any interaction with these bizarre Nephilim. If they really were giant beings, then one could understand the feeling that we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. But how did they know if the giants even noticed them? Unfortunately, even though Nechama Leibowitz posed this great question, she didn't give us any hint as to an answer. Not only that, but it seems like this question has been around for a very long time. The Bible scholar Jacob Milgram in the JPS commentary quotes a midrash from the ancient rabbis in which God rebukes the spies. I take no objection to your saying, we look like grasshoppers to ourselves, but I do take offense when you say, so we must have looked to them. How do you know how I made you to look to them? Perhaps you appeared to them as angels. And this is from Numbers Rabbah. On the other hand, Rashi says that the spies reported overhearing the giants talking to one another, saying, there are ants in the vineyard that resemble human beings. Rashi is also quoting an ancient midrash, this one from the Talmud. Rashi answers our question directly, but he doesn't address the feeling I get from the text that the spies were reacting out of panic and insecurity rather than objectively reporting what they saw. On the other hand, perhaps Rashi is trying to emphasize their lack of confidence. After all, an ant is even smaller and more easily crushed than a grasshopper. The European commentator, Rav Yaakov ben Asher, who died around 1343, also known as the Baal HaTurim, quotes a midrash that makes the spies seem almost delusional. In this version, the spies report that one of the giants ate a pomegranate and tossed aside the husk, and all 12 spies entered it and sat down in it. We sat down in it like grasshoppers. Now that must have been one humongous pomegranate. If you're smiling and thinking to yourself, what a silly story. I think you understand the force of this midrash. I think the very absurdity of this midrash is a clue to its meaning. It's silly and ridiculous to project your own insecurities onto others, thinking you know what they think about you. As the earlier midrash said more explicitly, maybe the spies appeared as angels. I think that we can also hear in this midrash the fear that the spies had been feeling, desperate to avoid the challenge of going up to the land. Perhaps they found themselves saying anything that came to mind, even if it was biased to the point of absurdity. Many of us have had those moments when our insecurities have overwhelmed our reason. We might even consider the possibility that the Baal HaTurim is portraying the spies as so fearful as to be pathetic, objects of sympathy rather than scorn. On the other hand, consider the imagery of this midrash in more symbolic terms. The spies arrived at their self-assessment as grasshoppers by sitting down in the husk of the pomegranate. Perhaps the image of the outer shell or husk which surrounds the spies when they sit in it is a hint that their real problem is that they don't look any deeper into things, seeing only outward appearances. Based on the outward appearance of things, this ragtag bunch of former slaves could never enter the land. Seen with the eyes of faith, even giants couldn't stop them. Again, the spies present themselves as more tragically flawed than deliberately disrupt it. Paralyzed by fear, thinking of themselves as weak and ineffectual, they could see only the surface reality of physical strength, not the spiritual truth of their destiny as dwellers in the promised land. Seeing only the outer husk of things keeps us from moving forward. But having faith in ourselves and faith in the Holy One enables us to grow, evolve, and become what we're meant to be. May we all find the courage not to look through rose-colored glasses, but through the glasses of reality, and find our strength and courage to move ourselves forward in whatever way we can. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Yasher Koach.
Yasher Koach.
Yeah.